Did you enjoy part 1 of episode 76 of the Vincast, Australia's premier wine podcast? It was with Nathan Reeves. If you're listening to this and you haven't heard it yet, definitely go back and listen to it. But if you did listen to it and you enjoyed it and you're interested to find out how you can actually buy some Out of Step Wine Co. wines for yourself, then definitely head to differentdrop.com/intrepidwino, where there is a special section on the Different Drop website dedicated to guests of this podcast. Different Drop, if you haven't heard me mention it before, is an online wine retailer based in Sydney, and they only work with Australian wineries of authenticity, provenance, and innovation. Usually small batch wines. They can only source wines in very small volumes, so it's always a good idea to make sure to jump on any new wines they have available as soon as you can to make sure that you don't miss out. And why not go and put together a little Out of Step Wine Co. pack, and make sure you're putting in the code INTREPIDWINO at purchase to get yourself a 10% discount for any wines that you buy. Thank you very much, Different Drop, for your support of this podcast, for your support of the guests of this podcast, and thanks, guys, for listening to another episode. Episode 76, Part 2 of the Vincast, I chat with the other half of the Out of Step Wine Co., Dave Chatfield. Hello there, Vincasters, and welcome to another episode, or part 2 of another episode of the Vincast. My name is James Scaresbrook, otherwise known as the Intrepid Wino, and if I haven't mentioned already, if you haven't listened to the most recent episode of the Vincast, that's actually part 1 of this episode that you're currently listening to. So as I mentioned on the last episode, I was contacted by my guest for this week, representing his business Out of Step Wine Co. after he saw my YouTube Let's Taste video tasting one of their Chardonnay wines from a previous vintage. And when he reached out, I invited both himself and his business partner on as guests of the podcast. But what I thought I'd do is sort of sit down with them separately to get their individual experiences, their backgrounds, to kind of learn a little bit about how they both approaching the project together. So my guest on this episode is Dave Chatfield. Dave had a quite an interesting and successful career in the music industry, and you know, some of the musicians, the groups he mentions are pretty astounding, and so it was really fascinating kind of hearing how his experience with wine and his passion for his experience with music, his passion for music, kind of influenced the way he views wine and the kind of wines that he wanted to make. So I do hope you enjoyed this really fascinating chat that I had with Dave. I certainly did. Please stick around to the end of the episode so you can find out how to get in contact with myself and Dave to thank him for being on the podcast. But until then, I will see you on the other side. David, thank you very much for making some time to be on the Vincast.
Thanks, James. How you going?
Not too bad. More importantly, thank you very much for sitting through that lovely chat that I just had with Nathan.
So now I can just correct the record.
When he said this, what he actually means is... but as you would have heard, I ask my guest, just to start off with, if they can remember that first interaction with wine that made you really sort of sit up and take notice of it.
Yeah, I'm familiar with your questions.
Oh, he's come prepared.
Frequent listener. I have thought about this question, actually. The earliest recognition or memory that I have of wine is my father was really into wine.
Yeah.
And so I'm a child of the sort of 70s and 80s. And I suppose in that era, he was very into sort of Henschke and Penfolds and those sort of things. But he also loved Tawnies and ports and liqueur muskets and things.
Where did you grow up?
In Sydney. Yeah.
Oh,
okay.
So
he'd do sort of, forays into the Hunter and Mudgee and Orange and Rutherglen and those sort of places. And
Was he some form of professional?
he was, I suppose, an entrepreneur, for want of
okay.
a better word, but he had a pretty amazing cellar
Yeah.
of iconic Australian producers.
Sure.
And I had very little interest in wine through much of my childhood and adult life. But one thing he used to do when I was sick was give me a liqueur musket to, I don't know, ward off whatever germs were attacking my system. And I don't know that would be smiled upon in this day and age, but I thought it was pretty cool when I was, 11 or 12 years old.
Is it muscat or tokay that kind of has that tea smell?
Well, usually that's tokay, isn't it?
Yeah. Because I would think that'd be really good for when you've got a cold.
Look, I can't say for certain what he was giving me and how watered down it was or whatever. But I remember being really amazed with the flavour and the intensity and, the really, just beauty of those wines.
Okay.
But I was a little kid.
Sure.
And then I suppose for a long time, wine for me was just an alcohol delivery system. I was really into music and I worked in the music industry for a long, long time. And, you don't get good wine at music venues generally. So I was drinking primarily beer. But I guess as that music business became more and more successful, we were taking, I was touring international bands and we were taking them out to fancy restaurants and drinking some pretty good booze. And I was suddenly like, whoa, this is probably 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
I was like, hang on, there's something else going on here. And I remember one of the clearest memories I have, and it's probably not a wine that I'd probably enjoy drinking it now, but it's philosophically not where my head is at with wine, but drinking a Yatana and just going, holy hell, like this is Chardonnay.
Yeah.
And being absolutely blown away by the purity and intensity and length and concentration and complexity of that wine. And and then just getting, well, I guess, leading into my sort of stories, getting more and more disillusioned with music and more enamored with food and wine and going, I don't want to die wondering, so I wonder if I could learn how to make wine.
So going back, with your family, did your parents drink wine at home?
Oh, yeah, every night.
With dinner?
Yeah.
So they, whether you're aware of it or not, they kind of possibly instilled that kind of idea of what wine was for. It was to be enjoyed, was to be shared and to be had with food.
Oh, most definitely. And there was a lot of, raucous dinner parties where I'd be a little kid sort of supposed to be asleep upstairs, but sitting at the top of the stairway, just listening to the chaos going on downstairs, and then come down the next morning and find all these empty wine bottles of, I suppose classic sort of, Hunter producers and, like I mentioned earlier, other iconic Australian producers. And
better empty wine bottles than wine casks.
Yeah. No, we were never a goon family.
No.
But yeah, like it was pretty lost on me for my teens, and even my father died when I was not that young, but I was in my 20s, and left an amazing cellar that my mother has proceeded to destroy. And it really didn't mean anything to me.
I really hope you didn't mean that
No,
literally.
I didn't mean that literally. I mean
good.
metaphorically, as in she drank it, and But so no, wine was always this thing of that was about food and about enjoyment with friends.
Sure.
And and something else I remember vividly that my father did that I now do is like at least once a year he'd pull every wine out of his cellar and put them down and go through his checklist and
Catalogue them
Jeez. And figure out what he was going to drink and when, and then put them back away in that order. And it's not lost on me that I now do this. And it's pretty weird learned behaviour, but
So what were you doing in the music industry, and how did you end up in the music industry?
Look, I ended up in the music industry.
Were you a musician as well?
I was a terrible musician, but I attempted to be a musician in my teenage and early 20 years, but I proved to be,
Musical influences?
Oh, look, man, I mean, it's like, I like good music. That's what I like to tell people. I guess,
that's why people say, what's your favourite wine?
Yeah,
good wine.
Yeah. But I suppose, when you become really fixated, as I had the tendency to do with things that I become passionate about, I got really, really into music and just became one of those guys who, I suppose, in my early 20s was probably a real geek, and just used to go to see bands 6 nights a week, and had lots of friends who were in bands, and this was just kicking around the periphery of the industry.
Just completely immerse yourself.
Yeah, and then I'd done a business degree, and a friend of mine Nick Dalton had a record label called Half a Cow, and he went off to join the Lemonheads
Yep.
and asked me to run his label while he was overseas. So I
Yeah.
was 21 years old, I think, and went, yeah, I'll have a crack at this. And and then from there,
The music industry is probably one of the only ones where 21-year-olds are like, yeah, I'll give it a crack. That or maybe a skateboarding company.
Yeah. Well, look, he just picked me because I knew all the bands, and
Fair enough.
I seemed trustworthy and responsible as well.
Seemed.
As well as being somebody who socialised.
Yeah.
And then from there, I got involved in Australian music for quite a long time in Sydney, and then decided I wanted to tour some international bands, and sort of hooked up with a mate who wanted to do the same, and we started bringing out international acts to Australia, just putting everything on our credit cards and
Far out.
and taking what in hindsight were massive risks, and bringing these underground bands to Australia. This is sort of pre, I suppose, alternative music becoming mainstream or whatever, and
Commercially successful.
yeah, and we used to be able to deal direct with the band, so there were no managers, agents. It was all really simple, and it was all just profit share, and it's sort of, if you pay for our flights, we'll come kind of thing. So yeah, there was no real, well, there was a market for it. It's just the mainstream didn't know the market existed. So we brought out things like Smog and, I don't know, Lamb Chop and Guided by Voices and Yola Tango, and so we did a lot of these tours, very naively, but
now
quite
considered
successfully.
Like the darlings of rage at sort of 3 a.m.
Yes, and from there I kind of met more and more people, I guess, who own venues, and people were sort of offering to help fund our business to grow it. And
Sure.
I ended up partnering up with a guy in Melbourne who owned the Punters Club in Melbourne, and still owns the Corner and Northcote Social Club, or he's one of the guys who owns the consortium of people who own those venues. And we set up a touring company, and I did that till sort of 2013. I finally extricated myself from that because I just had enough, and I really wanted to pursue something else, and I'd become really passionate about wine. And so I came to wine pretty late, and with not a lot of knowledge either. But
I think what's interesting is, in the same way that you kind of immersed yourself in music when you kind of were yourself geeking out about it, you were just passionate about it. You kind of, it sounds like you sort of discovered wine and kind of sort of got more and more interested, and kind of went, there's so much to know about this. I just want to immerse myself in wine.
I suppose it's,
not literally.
It's about things that evoke emotions in you. So I always just had a really strong emotional reaction and connection to music. And even when I was a preteen into really shit pop music, I was the kid at school tipping everyone else off about what the next hit song was. Yeah. And then, obviously discovered there's this world of music that's far more interesting than what people would like you to believe is out there, or, the less commercial kind of music. And I went backwards as well, and, got into music from, the 50s and 60s and 70s and whatever. And and then got really into the underground sort of punk scene, and and just kind of kept finding more and more. It's like wine, you keep just finding more and more interesting niches of people who are not doing things that are high volume or commercial, but are really fascinating and really genuine expressions of what they're into.
In the same way that you want to find authentic wines that speak about where they're from, and like every region's different, every wine, every variety is different. Did you kind of like listening to different styles of music, but like kind of gravitate towards the artists that had their own voice within
that's a
genre?
Really fundamental thing, is that I kind of never liked things that were that easy to pigeonhole. Like as soon as you could give it a label, it was a bit lost on me, I suppose, and that's just a personal approach.
What's that great quote from Wayne's World? If you label me, you negate me.
Yes. But so like it was. I obviously. I probably find more interest to me in things that are really that I think are really genuine expressions of. Well, for me with wine, it's about a site. It's not about a winemaker.
Sure.
It's about a place.
Sure.
And obviously with music, it's about a musician or a songwriter or whatever. So,
yeah. In the same way you get into the studio and you just want to capture the pure essence of the music and not fuck it up. basically.
Yeah,
Not put too many effects and stuff like that, or what's that stupid
and that was
thing
philosophically, I suppose, coming out of someone who's really into, not what people call punk
Auto-tune.
now, but sort of into and I don't know, all genres of music, but trying to figure out the things that were pure expressions and that weren't made, I suppose, in a contrived or conscious kind of attempt to, tick some genre related boxes and have a commercial success. So and that's, to me, that's one of the really amazing things about wine, is that it's that European approach to it, where it is about sight. It's not about it's less about the winemaker being the rock star. It's about the site being the rock star kind of thing. So yeah.
So as you sort of started to experience more about wine, this was as you were kind of entertaining your clients,
overseas
as it
guests.
were. What sort of places were you dining at?
Oh, like all the classic sort of Melbourne, 2 and 3 headed restaurants. I suppose
McConnell restaurants.
And Taxi and Azad and Press Club and all sorts of places. So depending on how successful the tour was. So, the people who were making us big dollars would get the big dollar dinner. But I suppose, the business kind of grew and became busier and busier, and you're always, involved in entertaining these people. And I suppose, you want to show them a good Australian experience. So you want to show them that Australian food is really world class and that Australian wine is really world class. So you sort of feel you have that passion about it, and you want that's what you want them to leave with, that impression. It's just.
Were you connecting with the sommeliers at this
No,
stage?
not at all. The odd one. I mean, there's a lot of people in wine who are really into music, obviously, and that sort of enabled me to transition a bit. But it was more meeting winemakers who were really into music enabled me to get vintage jobs and have little sabbaticals from music and go to a vintage somewhere. But no, look, I was at this point I wasn't studying.
Are we talking Yeasty Boys?
Not directly, no. Although Proudy's a good mate of ours, but no. Steve Flamsteed was probably the first person.
Sure.
Who, when I finally managed to negotiate with the touring business, which I was a partner in, to get leave to go do a vintage. I'd been doing my winemaking degree for a few years. I just was emailing people and making really impassioned pleas that I have no experience, but I really want to do this. And Flamo bit because he's really into music, so he was like, "Come in and have a chat."
What did he do? Like, look at your CV and go, "Whoa, what's all this music stuff?"
Yeah, well, I had nothing wine based on my CV other than I'd been studying a winemaking degree,
right?
And I wasn't like in my 20s. I was older, and so some people would go, "What's this guy trying to do? Make this transition from one career to another or one industry to another." But he's really into music, and he's an awesome guy. He's become a really good mate, and he just sent me an email going, "Come in and have a chat." And so I did, and then he's like, "Come and work vintage." So I did, and
so taking it back, at a certain point, you said, "Look, I'd like to get more into the wine industry," and winemaking was the path you kind of wanted to go down.
Yeah.
Did you think about doing anything else?
No, because I don't know. To me, if you're really into something, I suppose with music, I tried to make it and I wasn't very good at it, and I ended up taking another direction in that. And I was never a frustrated musician. I just accepted the fact that I wasn't great at making music. But I loved music. I was never so much into there's a lot of ego. There's a lot of kind of. There's a lot of weird shit that goes on in the music industry, and I was just fundamentally someone who loved music and wanted to bring out bands that I admired, and that, as the business grew, became a little more cloudy because you've got staff and you've got relationships with agents overseas, and they want you to work with their acts, and you sort of end up if you have strong ethical feelings about it, you feel a little bit compromised. But if you find just to go, well, it's a business, then, you're fine. But I struggled with that a bit, and I struggled with a lot of the ego and things in that industry. Sorry, what was your original question? I've muddled.
Why? So you chose to go get
Okay,
into
yeah.
winemaking?
So what sort of happened is, I guess, yeah, I became more and more disillusioned with music and felt that, yeah, I really wanted to learn how to make wine as I started drinking more and more interesting wines and, going out to visit wine regions and, yeah, just something I just wanted to explore. And it just seemed logical to me that if I was that passionate about this thing, wine, like, why wouldn't I want to learn how to make it? So,
Yeah.
and I didn't quite know, as sort of your chat with Nath alluded to, neither of us quite knew where it was going, but it was just something we got onto of, I want to learn how to make this. And so, yeah.
Yeah, but it sounds like it's a pretty similar path you had in music in terms of, well, okay, you're 21, yeah, sure, I'll take on this record label and let's take some risks with the acts that we're touring with and that sort of thing. So it's like, yeah, I'm going to give winemaking a crack.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's just a bit of a personal sort of approach to life. Is like, I didn't want to lead a safe kind of, button down sort of, a secure job. I just wanted to have fun and do things I enjoy and follow my passions.
You have good reason to do it.
Yeah.
But if you're passionate about it.
It may be much to my financial detriment, but, so be it.
Finances.
I've eaten well, I've drunk well.
Yeah, exactly. It's about life. It's about the experience.
Yeah.
If you enjoy what you do.
Exactly. So, yeah, that's sort of been, the road of the two careers that I've, been on to date is just following, being really passionate about something, but having a bit of a entrepreneurial sense and a bit of business nous and, figuring out how can I make this work. And
so were you studying at MIT as well?
Yeah, so in 2009, I started in that degree. I'm a proud dropout now, I suppose. I did all my chem, I did my tasting subjects. I learned a lot. Like, it was awesome, and I realised how little I knew when I started. And wine's like one of those things that the more you know, the less the more you realise that you know bugger all kind of thing. So just that it's sort of unfolding in front of you. But yeah, I didn't know much at all, and it was awesome. But I think similar to what Nath said to you earlier, it was teaching you to make wines that I was drinking wines and I was finding out how they were made, and I was going, this isn't what we're being told. So yeah, or the way vineyards were being looked after, and then you taste a wine from a certain grower and you go, well, they don't manage their vineyard this way at all. So it was awesome in that
it's not possible this wine can taste so good because it's not what we're being told is the good way of working.
I think, it's obvious that degrees have a responsibility to deliver to the market the best possible candidates for jobs, and the jobs are with big wineries. So,
absolutely.
And that's cool. And they don't expect you to actually go out on your own. And well, at that point they didn't. It seems to me now that a lot of people who are doing winemaking degrees are wanting to go out on their own, and that's really great. It's a pretty cluttered market space,
Well, like you, that might be their second or even their third career, and they're going, look, I might actually be independently wealthy, or I might not have a really solid day. But, I mean, if you look at what happened back in the 80s and I guess the early 90s as well, when you've got like hobby farmers in places like the Mornington Peninsula and the Yarra Valley, these people were professionals. Like they might
doctors,
get a pretty decent salary. As you say, doctors, lawyers, or in finance, something like that.
Yeah,
and they kind of just go, oh, this. Well, I mean, partly surely it was. Maybe is it still a nice little tax write-off?
I don't know if
I think I changed
the returns are as wonderful as they were back then.
But they just kind of did it.
Yeah.
Because they wanted to do it and they wanted something else to do, and then eventually they kind of went, well, I'm going to quit my job, even if it's my own sort of law firm or doctor's practice. Yeah. And I'm just going to dedicate myself to this full time.
We of course approached it from being stone broke, having no money, but
but that's punk rock wine.
Certainly not the overt intention to be punk rock or anything, but it was just this thing of
guitars and drums cost money.
They do,
and so does recording, studio time, that kind of thing.
So do barrels and fruit. But yeah, it was kind of, and that's the way we've approached the business, is just to grow it under our own steam, under being able to reinvest. So we both work other jobs to do this. It's certainly a massive priority for us, and I think in the not too distant future one or both of us will be devoted full time, which will be awesome. But we've had to just keep reinvesting.
Yeah.
And we want to make 5 or 6 different wines, or probably more a year. So it just means, you're adding every year. We're not just making more Sav or more Shardy. We're chopping and changing vineyards, and so
it never ceases to amaze me how much I can go out to my customers, and every time I say, "So what's new? Get something new for me?" they just want to see new stuff all the time.
Yeah.
If you're a regular listener of the Vincast, you'll know that I don't really go into a lot of detail, like technical information about wines. I don't really like to talk about the sort of fundamentals of a wine, or really go into too detail about tasting notes. I certainly don't really give a rating for wines. But if that's the kind of thing that you are interested in, and how can you not be, it's a really great resource, then I definitely recommend checking out Wine Companion, who is another supporter of this podcast. Wine Companion is an annual wine guide about Australian wines. There's also a magazine that comes out very regularly with articles written by fantastic wine writers around the country, some of whom have been on this very podcast, but also has fantastic tasting notes, ratings, vintage information, particularly on their website, winecompanion.com.au. If you are interested in subscribing to any kind of package with Wine Companion, as a bonus, listening to this podcast, if you put in the code Intrepid30 at purchase, you'll actually get a 30% discount from Wine Companion. So it's an amazing saving, very generous from the guys at Wine Companion. And I certainly appreciate their support of this podcast, and I appreciate you listening. But so working with Steve at Giant Steps was your first sort of official wine job?
I helped a guy, Mark Matthews, who does Caledonia Australis and does a lot of contract stuff. So he has a vineyard out in Gippsland, and then winery in Sunbury. So I sort of helped him in 11, but 11, there wasn't a lot of fruit in 11, so it was a bit of a non-event in terms of vintage. And he was great. He's a friend to this day as well. And I basically just went to his winery after work every day and hung out and did whatever he needed me to do, and just tried to
pro bono
pick up. Yeah. It was just he ended up, I think he gave me some wine. I can't remember, but that wasn't what it was about. It was just about trying to get some experience and try to...
Nice gesture, though.
Yeah, and learn and get a feel for it, and I guess get a sense of what goes on. And I suppose like what Nath was alluding to too is you kind of... Not that this was Mark's approach, but you sort of realise after doing a few vintages that it's a really industrial process, especially at, bigger scales.
Yeah, of course.
And your romantic notions of how wine's made can be... crushed pretty quickly, no pun intended. But but there are other ways to do things, and that's what I suppose what we realise with Out of Step is we can have a much more hands-off approach with our winemaking and make it more about sourcing premium fruit. And you start to like I was saying earlier, is you start to taste wines and you go, well, this was wild fermented and hasn't been fine, hasn't been filtered, and it's vibrant and alive and it's juicy and delicious and changes in the glass, and and that's what interests me. It's not about producing a consistent house style of wine from a variety every year. It's about expressing the site and the season. And winemaking's interventionist enough, I think, with trellising and training and picking dates and, choosing how you're going to ferment it and those sort of things. That do you need to add all these other chemicals and go through all these other processes, or can it be something that can be just a little bit more expressive of where it's from and how it was grown and the year it was grown in. So that's kind of been our approach from the outset, and they're the ones that kind of excite me as well.
So do you think it has a lot to do with that kind of new wave of Australian winemaking and all these, a lot of great wines coming out now from younger, more dynamic, more kind of like not in that classic model of you have to buy a vineyard and plant it and wait for it to be bearing decent fruit. You have to invest in a facility and you have to invest in all the right equipment and stuff like that. Whereas now, it's a lot more I think it has a lot to do with the global financial crisis and the fact that, a lot of markets overseas have sort of stopped buying a lot of Australian wine. That has allowed, accessibility to fruit.
Yeah, I don't know where we fit in that, and it's really hard to know when it's you doing it. And also, I wasn't aware of them when we started, and maybe a lot of those guys.
So what were the wines that you were drinking that kind of,
I suppose,
more interested? Were they were Australian wines?
Yeah, they were, and probably a lot of European wines, to be honest, as
Okay.
well. So getting just drinking more Chablis and Burgundy, and then reading about the producers, and drinking more Italian wine as well.
Okay.
And Sicilian wine, and
yeah,
and I don't know. I guess that's probably where my head is a lot of the time still anyway. But yeah, I didn't have a consciousness about that there was anything going on in Australia. I didn't. Yeah, it's not like we're not innovators in what we've done. And I know there's a lot of guys who have been going longer than us who've only made their name in the last 4 or 5 years that make great wines like Jamshed and Nakota Barrels and those guys. But yeah, my awareness wasn't of them when we started.
but you must have been tasting the wines and then connecting with them to then say, well, what's this one and this one got in common compared to all the other stuff that I'm not really excited about?
Yeah. But I suppose, look, I was probably more focused on Europe, to be honest.
Sure, okay.
Yeah, and drinking as widely as I could. And then, I suppose as we started to make wine, then I became more aware of these other Australian producers who had similar philosophical or stylistic sort of approaches to us, and would taste their wines and go, wow, they're really exciting wines.
Okay.
And some of them we know well and, we're friends with, and others I've never met, and I just admire their wines from a distance. And
well, there's certainly a lot of exciting stuff happening in the Yarra Valley, for example. Even people who are based in the Yarra Valley.
Yeah.
Gary only has one wine, I think, from the Yarra Valley.
Yeah, I mean, Luke Lambert's wines, I think, are really interesting. And, and they were wines I probably was aware of when we were starting, definitely.
And certainly you're getting some fruit from arguably one of the most exciting vineyards in the country right now, which is the Simon Yarra Vineyard.
Yeah. We didn't this year.
Oh, okay.
We're not planning to next year. Well, we took Chardonnay from there, and they bloody pulled it out.
What?
That
Chardonnay's great.
You'd have to talk to Stu about that one. But I'm not going to speculate as to.
I'll invite him on and then ambush
the rationale. Well, he's a great guy, Stu. Look, that Chardonnay was really exciting fruit, we felt. But anyway, they have other plans as to what they're doing.
Sure, okay.
And it's their vineyard, so, they can do what they want.
Yeah.
We did a Shiraz from there in 14 as well,
yeah.
Which was, mostly whole bunch and no new oak. And, so trying to make, a pretty floral kind of medium-bodied sort of, juicy, Yarra Shiraz. But, great site, and not to say we wouldn't go back there. But we're restless too. We've got sort of core wines that we do in core vineyards that we buy from. So the Nebbiolo is an ongoing thing.
Yeah.
The Lusatia Park Sav will hang on to that as long as we can.
Yeah.
Although the vineyard's just been sold, so that's a little bit of uncertainty there. That's actually my day job too. Working in that vineyard. Yeah. So
it's even more of an emotional connection.
I don't know. But look at who knows what's going to happen there. It's
So when you met Nathan when you were both studying, had you both kind of formulated an idea about the kind of wines that you liked? And
I don't think so. I think I was probably drinking a lot of stuff that I would really turn my nose up at now. But that's kind of part of the journey, isn't it? Is you sort of...
Well, how did you kind of both come together and sort of realize that, look, these are the kind of wines that I like. Oh, I like them too. Hey, do you want to do some wines together with that in mind?
I think we've got common ground, but I also think we probably don't like the same stuff either. And that's part of, we drink different things and we challenge each other with wines. So we've got enough common ground in a philosophy, and that philosophy is about, I hate putting labels on things, but is about, minimal intervention winemaking.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So, but we don't always agree on what's a delicious wine.
Sure.
But
that doesn't mean... But that's exactly the point with wine, is that it's completely subjective.
Doesn't mean the wine isn't good.
No.
It's just that I didn't love it and he does love it, or vice versa. So,
yeah, okay.
And we don't want... where we agree is on faulty wines or wines that are boring.
Yeah.
So,
Or wines that don't necessarily taste like where
that
they're
don't
coming
move
from.
you. Like wine's got to move you one way or another. So if you don't feel passionate about it, then I don't know.
There's
Just
certainly a
move
lot
on
of
to the
wine.
next wine.
There's certainly a lot of wine out there that I kind of go, yeah, it's all right.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with it. It's
Yeah,
just it's not very interesting.
But that's like music. I don't want to listen to music that doesn't move me or I don't get excited about. So
Yeah.
why would I waste my time?
Yeah.
But anyway.
With the right additives, you enjoy it.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And so when you kind of sat down, where did Out of Step come from as far as the name?
Oh, okay. I guess it's the philosophy behind it is running from the pack. It's about doing your own thing and not being afraid of that. And that not being a bad thing, like just being out of step with what's going on in the world. 'Cause,
Sure.
I don't know. I just,
Not necessarily bowing to trends.
Yeah, and just doing your own thing and not being part of a pack. But the actual reference is an old hardcore band called Minor Threat, who
Okay.
the irony is not lost on me. They're a straight edge band who really do not embrace the consumption of alcohol,
which is out of step in its own way. It's very rebellious.
There you go. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah.
but it's just it was just a name I had that I'd used for my music company that I owned the touring company. So yeah, I had my own company that was sort of owned the touring.
That's why when I put Out of Step into Google, it comes up with, I was like, what's this music thing?
Yeah, well maybe. So I'd use the name
on Twitter.
For a while. I don't know. That wasn't me. I was never on.
Although
Twitter.
maybe it's not you, but I did find some references to music.
Okay. Yeah, so it was just a name we liked, and I
Okay.
just threw it out there, and Nath had to think about it and thought it was it fitted kind of where we were coming from. So,
and the idea around that first label, because that first one have the kind of topographical maps.
Look at just a mate
on
of mine who done a lot of music graphic design
for
me, and we just asked him for a label, and he was pretty happy to do it for wine.
Yeah. Why not?
Got to take those.
I'd be buying it anyway.
Yeah. So So that was just where that came from.
And so when you came together, like, what did you talk about as far as planning? It's like, we've got this wine, but what else could we do? What could we do next year?
I think, I mean, going back, probably most of our planning meetings, we ended up fairly intoxicated, I'd say. So, but yeah, we just talked about varieties we liked, and it was always about
varieties or styles or like wines from certain places.
Yeah, I was gonna say it was about varieties and regions. So
sure,
what works well and why do we like these wines?
Yeah.
So yeah, Nebbiolo was just something we both had a real affinity for, and we knew about the Malakoff vineyard in the Pyrenees, and Nath, like he referenced just badgered to get fruit from there, and we got lucky in that they said, we got a couple of ton we can do you. So we got that. And it was just trying to think what varieties might work well in a region that are a little bit underexpressed. So the idea of doing a GSM from Heathcote was, Heathcote just screams Southern Rhone varieties to me, but everyone just plants Shiraz. So, is there any Grenache and Mourvedre up there that's worth, looking at that we can do a GSM blend?
Okay.
Upper Yarra Sav was just, when we first got that fruit, was just such a maligned thing. Everyone was pulling it out.
Same thing with Riesling. I can't believe what in the Upper
Riesling's
Yarra.
I love Riesling, but everyone just says it's really hard to sell. So that it's one of those wines that the public
Sauvignon Blanc definitely
haven't embraced. Well, the thing with Sav from there is, it's cool, so it's not ripening until sort of, mid-March. Retains its acidity. It's rarely tropical. It's just much more in a citrusy kind of spectrum.
Not green and...
No, you wait till that's gone, and it
sort
of just ripens slowly.
Yeah.
So you get this, you can get it in a really good place, and the acidity is still really good. And then just wild fermented and, a bit of new oak, but don't leave it in there too long. You're just trying to build a bit of texture and structure and a bit of funkiness to it. And
personality.
Yeah. And it just seemed, I don't know, we knew from the first year we took that fruit that nobody else was taking fruit off that vineyard. They were, as in Sav, everyone wanted Chardonnay and Pinot. And
sure.
It's crazy now. It's all sold, and we're going to take 6 ton off there next year. But it was just this anomaly of it can be a really good drink, and it's so maligned by sommeliers and by wine aficionados, and then the greater public just love Marlborough style Sauv Blanc for some reason. I'm not going to question that. That's what people like. So, but yeah, it can be a really interesting, complex wine, and if it's a good side and it's made in a way that it can express itself. And
have you had an opportunity to actually head over to Europe to sort of visit some of the places that might have inspired you a bit?
No, look, my travels to Europe were all around music, and as I sort of said earlier, probably the finer points of wine were lost on me in those days. And then now I seem to keep going to Japan. So I just have a real affinity for that country. So
plenty good wine available there too.
There is, and it's very reasonably priced. But also, I just love sake. So like travelled up into the mountains last time to Takayama and all these tiny sake producers. Yeah, in this really old town, and just drink some of those unfiltered sakes. Just blow my mind. So, but yes, it's definitely, the next big trip has to be Europe with, a bit more of a focus on wine now that I've, headed down this path pretty deeply. So.
And and no doubt you're still sort of into the dining scene, that dining sort of situation as well, as far as with great wine comes great food.
Yeah, I guess dining at home more often than not these days though. And I've got a little kid, a little baby, and
you've been a bit less mobile of late.
Yes, I've also got my leg in plaster.
Yes,
so, but yeah, it's also part of the thing with the business and investing so much into it and working, fairly not incredibly well paid jobs in the wine industry to keep things afloat means a lot of our restaurant is on in places a lot of our wine is on in restaurants I can't afford to eat in at the moment. But whenever the opportunity arises, I love getting into Town Mouse is one of my faves around here.
You're not going to hear any arguments from me.
Really good people, and there's some great wine bars. Harry and Frankie's obviously a great spot, and
sure,
had a lunch at the Hotel Lincoln the other day. So
that's
really good. This guy Ian ex-Mavita who's taken over.
Reopened it.
That was really cool.
I'll have to check it out.
So I guess things aren't too bad, are they? From the sounds of that. But,
You're doing all right.
And
are the wines being exported at all yet?
Not yet, but we're working on it. We've got a pretty strong lead in the US. Which we've got some samples bloody stuck in customs at LA at the moment. So hopefully they will be en route soon to New York. But there's a couple of really promising leads over there. And then we've had some interest from the UK, but quantity is a bit of an issue for us too.
Sure.
Where it sells well here. We have some good people working for us in South Australia, New South Wales and Victoria. And we've got to make sure, we look after them. And it's just going to be a case of growing it. And
there's a story that I heard quite a few times. For example, when I was in France, like in Burgundy in particular, they'd have a Chinese customer come over and try the wines and go, "Okay, thank you very much." And then they'd send an email, a few months later going, "We'd like a container of that wine." It's like, I didn't even make half a container in total. You can't have a container of one wine. That's insane.
I had lunch on this week. It was our Melbourne distributors lunch, and I was Shane from Delamere in Tassie was there, who's a really good guy, and he's telling me he went to China and was the same thing. They're like, "Well, we'll take a container of that," and he's like, "We don't make wine by the container. Like, we could maybe do you half a pallet."
Yeah, so, there still is that kind of disconnect about what wine is and the fact that it's not
it's not a commodity
product. You can't just make more.
Well, it is a commodity, but it's not something you can can mass produce every year and make it to that quality as well. So it's obviously because it's so site driven if you're going to deliver that quality. So
with that in mind, do you have any plans for any other kind of product that Out of Step might?
We're playing around with beer at the moment. Yeah, that's sort of Nate's been bitten by the beer bug and then been slinging me books about beer. And in my convalescing state, I've been reading beer books and watching beer videos. And we both love beer. And we're obviously expanding the wine range a bit next year too. So we'll have our first crack at Pinot.
Oh, exciting!
The Upper Yarra site next year. Really good vineyard, probably won't say too much more about it than that. And we're going to do Central Victorian Shiraz for the first time as well. We've managed to find some best soul block clone on a very highly regarded vineyard. So we should do. Oh, and we've actually taken on a little vineyard of our own too. So that might be the world's craziest field blend. It's Gewurz, Cab Sauv, Shiraz, Pinot Noir, and Sauv Blanc.
Well, anyone listening, if you can find a crazier blend for a field blend wine,
I'm not saying that that's definitively what we're going to do, but
the challenge has been set.
Yeah, we'll just see how it goes. I mean, we didn't get onto it till October, but it's been pretty well looked after, and I think we'll get a decent crop off it this year. And we'll just see what the fruit, what it says to us, and what we'll listen to it and decide what we're going to make out of it. So
that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Lots and lots of stuff in the works. I'm excited to keep an eye on things and sort of see how things evolve. But thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, James. It's been great
for coming down, and
really appreciate it.
And thanks to your chauffeur today for bringing you into Melbourne. And obviously, I appreciate your time. Again, how can people kind of keep in touch and follow the Out of Step Wine Co. story?
There's a website, so outofstepwineco.com, and then that's our handle without the .com for Twitter and Instagram. We're probably not the most avid users of social media, but we are on there a bit. Or otherwise,
come vintage time, I expect.
There'll be probably more activity.
Updates.
And we've got our phone numbers and email addresses are on the website. So if people want to track down the wines or track us down, we both live out in Healesville.
Have a beer in Healesville.
Yeah, more than happy to sort of host small tastings or say hello. So,
fantastic. And obviously I look forward to hopefully in the new year having you both on Let's Taste Live.
Yeah, would love to do that.
Let's do a live streaming YouTube tasting. But thanks again, and let's keep in touch.
Yeah, cheers, James.
And thank you guys for listening to the second part of this episode of the Vincast. I have been James Scaresbrook, otherwise known as the Intrepid Wino. Of course, I would love for you to follow me on social media, Instagram and Twitter. You can find me at Intrepid Wino, and the podcast is on Twitter at the Vincast. Head to the Facebook page, facebook.com/Intrepid Wino. And like. And of course, as I mentioned, I do live taste, sometimes live, but let's taste videos on my YouTube channel, Intrepid Wino, which is all about Australian wine, basically. If you want to subscribe to the podcast, it's a really fantastic way to be able to download the episode as soon as it becomes available. And if you do subscribe, then please spare a few minutes just to give me a rating and a review. No matter what the platform is, it is really fantastic reference, not only for myself, but also for listeners and also possible guests who might want to be on the podcast, but want to kind of hear from the actual listeners. So engagement is really important to me. So, of course, head to intrepidwino.com and find out how you can actually get in contact with me if you want to be on the podcast, or if you want to make a contribution to the podcast in some way, or if you just want to suggest someone you'd like to hear on the show, please let me know. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks again to Dave and, of course, to Nathan for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the bottles that you generously donated. I look forward to having you both on a Let's Taste Live in the new year. Thanks very much, guys. I hope to see you on the next episode. But until then, bye.